So, you want to be a real estate investor, but where do you start? How do you know what information and sources to trust? That's where I come in. I'm Jonny Cattani, and this is the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. Hey guys, real quick, before we start, go to investwithcattani.com and download my free ebook, Is Commercial Real Estate Recession Proof? Now to today's show. What's up, guys? And welcome to another episode of the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Jonny Cattani, and I'm joined today by Mark Willis. Mark Willis is a man on a mission to help you think differently about your money, your economy, and your future. Mark is a certified financial planner, 3-time #1 best-selling author, and the owner of Lake Growth Financial Services, financial firm in Chicago, Illinois. As co-host of the Not Your Average Financial podcast, he shares some of his strategies for investing in real estate, paying for college without going broke, and creating income in retirement you will not outlive. Mark works with people who want to grow their wealth in ways that are safe and predictable to become their own source of financing and create tax-free income in retirement. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Jonathan. Glad to be on and can't wait to dive in.
Absolutely. Likewise. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Obviously, a lot to cover today. Has this always been what you wanted to do, what you got into, or kind of describe what you were doing before and what led you to now?
Money was something that was a anathema and a mystery to my family as a kid. I remember a brown paper bag where I'd collected enough coins and single dollar bills to amass about $50 to my name. At a 5-6-year-old's vantage point, that's a pretty awesome sum of cash. That's more net worth than most college grads have. So I was thrilled with my little, fortune, but my mom said it was time for us to open up a checking account so I could learn how to, balance a checkbook or whatever. And what a cool mom to do that, right? So anyway, she takes me to the bank and she walks me up to this absolute stranger in a suit. And the job I had was to give all of my life savings over to this absolute stranger. And what do you think a 5-year-old's going to do when you're faced with that sort of decision? Of course, distrust and fear and loathing and all this builds up and bubbles up. Eventually, I was cajoled into giving away all of my life savings to an absolute stranger who gave me the promise that he would keep it safe for me. To be honest, I felt it was safer in my paper bag in my sock drawer. Turns out I was about right when it comes to banking. So anyway, that's sort of my start to money. But then fast forward, I get into about 6 figures of student loan debt, no awareness of money. We graduate, my wife and I, between us with $120,000 of student debt in the midst of the Great Recession, with no jobs and no marketable degrees between us. And so here we are, right? What a great way to start our life out. And so, yeah, we fumbled along and figured this money thing out. It was a blessing in disguise, to be honest, because it got us super laser focused on this thing called money. We didn't graduate with finance degrees or anything. And so I started working for a CPA. I was so thrilled with this idea of finance and money and just getting my head straight on with our budget and whatever. But I was sitting in on these conversations with our CPA who I worked with. I mostly did tax returns, helped her with the tax prep and so forth. She was the CPA. I was just sort of the gopher mostly. But I would listen to her phone calls, Jonathan, and I would hear her make these calls to these 63-year-olds, 64-year-olds. I'm sorry, Mr. Client, Miss Client. I know you're 64 years old, but I just lost you a half of your life savings in the markets due to the market meltdown of 2008, 9, whatever. That blew me away. I mean, it was like being dropped into the front lines of a war. And I was scared to death that I would ever have to make that sort of a phone call to somebody. So I almost got out of the business of money and finance altogether, but I still needed to figure this thing out myself because we were still in loads of debt. So fast forward a few years, we found some strategies that I could feel comfortable implementing in my own life as well as in my clients. And that's what started our firm, Lake Growth Financial Services. And since then, yeah, we've had clients all over the country, over 1,000 clients, number of advisors that work with us as well. And it's just a thrill getting to bring people to new heights and net worths every single day.
That's awesome. I love it. What a great story. And obviously, I'm sure those clients are very grateful that you stayed in the game. Now, one thing I want to clarify is you know, a lot of people see the CFP and probably assume you're going to try to sell them on mutual funds and things. So kind of give us a difference between you know, certified financial planner and like a financial advisor, for instance, who might work for like Charles Schwab or something.
Well, that's a good point. Actually, there is no regulation or clarification or parameters around the words financial advisor. Okay, that means nothing from a like regulatory standpoint, and that should alert you that you may not know who you're talking to. You know, if anybody could call themselves plumber, that does not mean I'm going to let them into my basement and work on my pipes. Okay. So most financial professionals are typically going to be stock jockeys, investment advisors, typically looking to sell you a product that may or may not have your best interest at heart. Now, there's nothing wrong with selling people products. I buy them all the time, every day. And I enjoy them all the time, every day, you know, whether it's an iPhone or a car or whatever else. But you have to know what you're doing and who you're talking to. I don't want to ask my heart surgeon if I need back surgery, for example. I need to know who the specialist is I'm speaking to. And there are plenty of specialists on Wall Street, but let's just be clear. Investment and stock purchasers are different than financial planners. Okay. So there is a group of financial planners called certified financial planners. And I am humbled to be among them. I went through about 3.5 years of study and practice and mentorship to earn those letters after my name. It was a tough slog, I'll tell you, man, but it was one of the best experiences of my life because I feel like now I have a better sense of this world called money. And I have a few specialized strategies that I focus in on. But I realize that the big financial universe is big enough to involve real estate, stocks, insurance, estate planning, taxes, and more. We need a comprehensive, not so average solution to a bubbling up crisis. I heard the other day, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, that the average net worth of someone over age 65 is only $170,000. And their average income is 38 grand a year. So that's something that is going to burden us millennials. I'm an exennial, or I'm an elder millennial, I guess you'd say. But I'm still in that camp. So it's going to burden us because our adult parents, our boomer parents, are going to be calling on us before too long to ask us for a leg up, you know, in the nursing home. The average cost of a nursing home is $8 grand a month.
Jeez.
How many rental properties would you have to buy? How much capital would you have to raise to passively create $8 grand a month? You could probably do the math on that. So this is a big looming crisis coming at us. And every single day, 10,000 of our parents are turning age 65. Baby boomers are turning 65 to the tune of 10,000 people a day for the next 20 years. What's that going to do to the stock market, for one, as they all leave their jobs and start spending down their 401ks, and 10,000 more people every day are selling more than buying? What does that do to stock prices? That's my first question. And second, who is going to help all these baby boomers retire? Because the typical average stock picker gets paid on the way up. Okay, so they get paid on assets under management, typically is the way to go. So they're not going to be exactly incentivized to return your parents' calls when your parents are spending down all their money in their 401ks and IRAs. They're going to be calling that 35-year-old with that, you know, hot income and that growing IRA balance. So this is it matters who you talk to in the financial universe. And CFPs are a great example of someone who has to have your best interest at heart, your family's best interest at heart as fiduciaries. Anyway, so that's a long answer and a rant to your question, Jonathan, but that's what sets us apart, and I believe is the only right way to serve our clients. Whether we call ourselves CFP, I mean, who cares, right? It's all about trust. So make sure you work with someone who knows what they're talking about and that you trust.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And I love that. Very in-depth answer there. Now, along with the CFP, if I understand correctly, that's the one where as you go through, like towards the end, the last test you have to take, it only is offered like once a year, right? That's that. We're like, the first one's only twice a year, and then it just gets progressively less frequent from there, right?
It's like American Ninja Warrior, but with money.
Nice. I love that. So you mentioned that you have 3 strategies that you're typically offering to your clients. Let's start with your number one, like perfect financial strategy, you wish you could help everyone do, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. Well, no strategy is perfect for everybody. I'll start with that. So it comes down to our one-on-one consultations that we have with clients. You want to listen before you recommend. It's much like a doctor. Don't want to prescribe a bunch of stuff before you know what's going on with the patient, right? Of course, right? So we sit down over phone or over Zoom and we have a one-on-one discussion, kind of like we're doing right now, and we get to know each other. I listen more than I talk, which today's conversation notwithstanding, that's the goal, is for us to have roles reversed and for me to be asking our clients questions. And typically that's a good chunk of time. Now we start with the first conversation might be 10 or 15 minutes just to get to know each other. But then we're going to get into the real meat where we really understand, what are our goals here? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we concerned about? Is it inflation? Is it mom and dad moving to the nursing home? Is it kids coming up and needing to go to college? What is it that really lights you up or that keeps you awake at night, financially speaking? And then if I cannot help, I will let folks know that clearly at the end of the call. And there's no cost, of course, to that, just to listen and understand your situation. If I can be of assistance, then one of the conversations I like to start with, Jonathan, it'd be fun to do this live with you here on this podcast if you want.
Yeah.
It's your show, of course, but if you want to do that, we can. One of the questions I like to ask is, hey, let's just kind of, let's just blue sky this for a minute. Okay, so Jonathan, let's say you wake up and all of a sudden you've got a wand in your hand and you can create the perfect financial vehicle. Whatever you make will happen. The law will be changed. It'll be legal. It'll be perfectly reasonable for you to have one of these. Okay, so whatever it is, let's just sort of paint with this magic wand for a minute. What sort of functions? Get rid of the labels. I don't want to hear like things like Roth IRA or savings account, or just remove the labels and just tell me what functions you want your money to have. If you could just paint with the magic wand, what are the perfect characteristics of money for Jonathan? What would you want that money to do for you?
Capital preservation, growth, income.
Beautiful, man. That's great. Very well said. Capital preservation, meaning safety of principal, meaning it's not going to get bounced around and beat up with volatility. Growth, meaning a competitive rate of return, I assume, probably at least keeping up or beating inflation, and then generating some sort of stream of income. That's great. Anything else? You can make this anything you want.
No, I think that kind of covers all of it, honestly.
That's pretty good already. Yeah, that's better than most answers. So I'll add a few just for fun. What about tax-free?
Oh,
when I go get the money, right?
Absolutely. Duh. How could I forget that one?
Yeah. That'll be a big one in our lifetimes. If you think taxes are going up over your lifetime. How about private from, say, creditors or people trying to sue us or whatever? If you're in the real estate game, it's just a matter of when, not if, you're going to get sued. Hate to say it.
Asset protection would be huge.
Asset protection. Yep. How about, not riddled with a bunch of loaded expenses or fees? I know a lot of people who have investment portfolios that are getting whittled away with fees. The DOL, the Department of Labor, says that a 1% fee on your IRA over 35 years will eat up almost half of your life savings.
I mean,
just fees.
If a savings account, or if it's compounding, like money's compounding, right? Interest is compounding, then a fee would have to be the exact same thing if it's a percentage. So
that's right. Yeah. You talk about passive income. That's like passive income to the investment advisor, right?
Yeah.
Getting a fee off your back every year, whether the markets are up or down, they're getting paid.
Correct.
All right. That's pretty good, man. How about using as collateral for, leverage and leverage. So forth. Yeah,
absolutely.
And again, I'm just kind of spitballing with you here. This is a good list. I kind of started myself in my journey with this list or something like this. I was just sort of thinking to myself, I'm being told by so many people to get my Roth IRA or to get my, emergency fund or to pay off my debt the Dave Ramsey way or whatever. And I was just being told all this stuff. And I think a mentor of mine came to me and said, well, Mark, what do you want your money to do for you? And I'd never really thought about that. I'd just been sort of the guy that blindly signs off on his, his wife gets a 401k. Well, fine. We got a 401k. Oh, we should get Roth. Okay, let's get some Roth. Oh, we need a brokerage account. Oh, sure. I'll grab one of those too. Some crypto. Fine. And we just start throwing this stuff in our little backpacks, and we live our lives almost like this, like burden of rocks behind us. And we have no clue why we have all this stuff in our backpack, a couple of rental properties, whatever. Right. Mm-hmm. So what's it all for? So I was doing all this due diligence as a CFP, and I wanted something that would sort of act as my financial hub. I wanted something at the center of the entire financial project of my life. I needed it to help me pay off my debts. I wanted it to help me retire tax-free. I wanted it to have some competitive growth. Of all things, one of the strategies that I stumbled across in the midst of all this was something called Bank on Yourself. And it's a tool that, of all things, uses a little known variation of dividend paying whole life insurance.
Is this like the infinite banking strategy, basically?
It's a little bit like it. There's some clarifications there, but yes, it's similar to that if you've heard of that. It's using whole life insurance. It grows on a predictable, guaranteed basis. You can access it tax-free. Capital is preserved, meaning it's guaranteed it will not go down due to some market madness or somebody sneezing on somebody else or whatever. It just grows every year. What else? We've got access to it for loans, so you can use it like collateral, like a bank. It's creditor protected in almost every state in the United States. So if somebody sues you, they can't take it from you. It's going to do a decent return, keeping up with inflation. What else? Yeah, you can essentially use it as a stream of income in your retirement. So for me, that met most everything in my checkbox. It was the Swiss Army knife for me and my family. I used it to pay off all my student debt. I use it to invest in real estate. I use it for my business. I use it for my future income. It's the hub by which everything else operates in my business. And most people don't even know it exists. And most people think if they do hear it exists, they think, well, that's a scam, or that's just for rich people. And neither could be further from the truth.
Fascinating. I love it. So kind of, I guess, tell me what the differences are then, the Bank on Yourself versus the infinite banking.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So for your listeners that understand kind of the basics, a lot of people on YouTube and on podcasts use phrases like infinite banking or family wealth banking or 7702 accounts or wealth reserve capital banking. The list of derivations go on and on here. Here's the trouble. It's sort of like what we just talked about with CFP versus financial advisor. Okay. No program out there is certifying or authorizing people to use the phrase infinite banking. Now, let me give you another example. Let's say that, you're building an apartment building that you're raising capital for, and you find somebody who tells you that he can build you and engineer for you the elevators for this apartment building. And you just trust him because he says he's an elevator mechanic. Okay, fine. Go ahead and build me some elevators, please. Here's the question. Would you get in that elevator and push the button?
Probably not.
What would you need to do to feel safe before you push that button?
A lot of certifications from people who are authorized to do so.
There is only one certification program in the industry and in the financial universe on this specific topic, and it's the Bank on Yourself Professionals program. There are probably 1,000 YouTube channels out there with everybody talking about hanging their shingle, talking about infinite banking. I have unfortunately seen their work, and people think they have an infinite banking policy, and it ends up they've got a taxable endowment contract, or they've got a policy riddled with commissions and fees that cost them years on their growth of their policy. When they borrow from the policy, it can penalize them and stop the growth of the contract's money. I mean, these are all nightmare scenarios that folks don't even realize they have. And we've seen over 1,000 of these policies sent to us over the years. We'll do a review of anybody's policy, Jonathan, but the trouble is just the agent doesn't know what he doesn't know, and neither does the general buying public. So Pamela Yellen, about 10, 20 years ago, put together a certification and copyright and trademark program where about 200 of us financial professionals have gone through that training. I have to do ongoing certifications, tests. I have to do continuing education. And it's sort of just a stamp of approval for the buying public to make sure that they know what they're getting. When you engineer it right, it's like my iPhone, all I have to do is swipe and it works. Or it's like the elevator. All I have to do is push that button and it works. But if it's not designed correctly and if it's not serviced correctly, bad things happen. So that's my short answer. Slightly longer answer.
Fascinating. Okay, so this is like a legitimate. This isn't like infinite banking where it's just like a term that they've created. This is an actual program.
Yeah.
Okay, and so all of the steps in Bank on Yourself are laid out, and you just kind of plug and play for your situation.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. If that tool is a good fit. Now, again, as a certified financial planner,
Got it.
I don't just jump to that, but you asked what's one of my favorite strategies. I feel like that's got to be one to at least consider with many clients. And yes, if we're going to do it, we need to design it correctly. Boy, I've seen people have, the wrong companies. They've got the wrong setup on their policy design, and it just becomes, a really difficult thing to get out of. Now, we do sit down and look at options for folks if they're stuck in an old policy or a poorly designed one. In fact, you're familiar with the 1031 exchange in the real estate space. There's something called 1035 where folks have been able to transfer out. I just sat down with a client who's transferring out 4 old policies that were improperly designed by another agent, and they're 1035ing that money over to a new properly designed Bank on Yourself type whole life policy.
Okay, and this is whole life insurance is that's the foundation of it.
Mm-hmm. Same chassis. Yes, it's not indexed universal life. It's using a dividend paying whole life insurance contract issued by a mutual life insurance company, with paid up addition riders and a non-direct recognition loan. That's a mouthful. So we just call them Bank on Yourself policies.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you might be able to see the point of how this fits into real estate. Maybe
Absolutely.
It sounds like you've got some exposure to this. How have you seen this, or what conclusions have you come to with regard to how this might fit into real estate investing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, first and foremost is being your own bank, right? Bank on Yourself, obviously, but being your own bank, going to your policy, taking out a loan, paying yourself back, right? Hence the term, infinite banking, right? You kind of just in a loop with yourself. Mm-hmm. The one thing that never stood out to me, and it sounds like this Bank on Yourself really solves that, or one thing I never understood is you had to keep in infinite bank, you have to keep changing your policy as you sort of like grow, right? Like, and maybe this is the same in Banking Yourself, but like let's say you start with $50,000 and that's your plan. You can't ever grow, like do more than 50,000. I don't know. And I'm probably confused.
Yeah. But. You bring up a great point. What are the limits of Bank on Yourself designed policies? In one sense, there is no limit. And in another sense, there are several limits that we'd need to consider. First of all, again, making sure that this is the right fit for folks. Each policy has its own ceiling that you can pack into the thing. And it can be a very flexible ceiling. So for example, just had somebody put in about 30 grand into a policy, but later on this year, they'll be able to put in about 150 grand. And then they can drop it down to 0 next year if they need to, and then throw in 200 grand next year if they need to, and then back down to 30 grand or whatever. So they've got a very flexible up and down there. That ceiling and that floor can go up and down. Now, let's keep this in perspective. A Roth IRA also has a ceiling. What is it? Well, for you and me, it's $6,000, $6,000 is how much we can put into a Roth IRA. And I just said, we've got a guy who's doing several $100,000 into a policy. They are taxed in many ways the same way. The Roth IRA is tax-free. Life insurance can be accessed tax-free as well. Through the tax code, it says you can get access to the cost basis after tax money. And then even the gains can be borrowed against, which is also tax-free. So this is just like a Roth IRA in how it's taxed. But there's no income phase outs and there's no contribution limits to life insurance that the federal government imposes. There is both of those things with Roth IRAs. So I'm trying to kind of compare apples to apples there. But what happens if I reach my ceiling? Like my first 2 policies, I started to earn some more money getting out of my student loan debt and whatever. What do? You get another policy. You get a third policy if you need to. My wife and I had one, each of us. And we said, well, hey, we can do another. We can do a bit more. Let's just crack open a new policy and get it going. So sort of like bank accounts, you just sort of start collecting these things. They become a good addiction over time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Money's not the worst addiction you can have. That's for sure. I love it. Awesome. Well, I guess a big question would be, who would this not be right for?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a good question because you don't want to just jump into this because your uncle told you about it or because you heard it on even a cool podcast like this one. So I think the best thing you can do is just start asking a professional who's been certified and authorized by Bank on Yourself if this is the right fit. And a good CFP is going to have to tell you if it's not. So, I'd be honored to chat, or one of my colleagues would be honored to chat with folks. It's not typically a good fit, Jonathan, if folks are unable to save. You still have to pack your money away. And it could be a lump sum. I just got off the phone with a real estate investor. He's doing a sale of one of his properties. He's going to make about 50 grand net after taxes. He's going to put that into a new policy. All right. Have somebody else who has some cash flow coming in from various short-term rentals on some Airbnbs. They put a portion of that into policies each month. But you have to be willing to save. You have to be willing to live within your means. If you can't do that, we shouldn't recommend any kind of saving strategy until we kind of get our ship righted, correct? Right? So we're not sinking. Another person I'd say it's not really a good fit for is if you really desperately need like double-digit, triple-digit returns, because these policies are boring. They are steady. They are predictable, but they are anything but, wild and wonderful returns, especially in the first few years. It's sort of like buying some real estate. At first, you're going to have costs. You're going to have rehab costs. You're going to have closing costs. So it's going to take some time. It's like starting a business. It's going to take some time to get things rolling. Once it does, it gets more and more efficient. Each year you keep it, and it truly compounds. Like the literal definition of compound growth means no volatility and an upward slant to up and right. That is true compounding, unlike the stock market, which has beta and is volatile and goes up and down. So if you're comfortable with the tortoise and the hare all over again, if you're comfortable with the slow, predictable yields, middle single-digit returns over time is what I predict, then this is a good fit. If you must have all your cash doing 13% right away and cannot accept any kind of long-term plan for your money, I wouldn't recommend it. That's a short list there.
Fascinating. Okay. And once you did mention you can pull it out. So once you put it in, you could potentially take out the principal.
That's right. And in fact, here's where things get really interesting. Let's say that you had a really nice real estate deal. Give me a deal that's got some good yield on it. Tell me what your expectations are for some real estate these days.
Yeah. So typical, average is going to be like 8% preferred return, somewhere in like an 18 to 20% IRR, anywhere 8 to 10 cash on cash, probably.
All right. So let's say somebody wants to do a deal with you and put money into a project that you're working on, and they can get that 8% preferred return. Let's say instead of just giving you cash, they were smart and set up one of these policies first. All right. So now their policy is getting them, let's just use round numbers. Let's say they were getting 5% after tax yield on their cash value in their life insurance. And they borrow against that. And if it was designed the Bank on Yourself way, the policy will continue to grow as if there is no loan. So let's say they had $100,000 to give you. They borrow against their life insurance and hand you a check for $100,000. The policy is still going to earn interest and dividends on the entire $100,000, wow, even on the capital they borrowed. So now they're getting that similar, middle single digit returns on their policy's cash value, and they're getting your 8% preferred return, all things equal. That is an increase in their market returns without any additional market risk.
So why isn't everybody doing this?
We're shouting into a hurricane, man. That's why. Wall Street has got their hands around the neck of the average investor. And it is not true that you can get 12% in the stock market. I just have to say it as clear as I can. The real investor returns, according to third-party research like Dalbar, they do an annual study. The quantitative analysis of investor behavior study says that the average investor over the last 30 years has got wait for it, 3.6% over the last 30 years in the stock market. Why do we always hear about 8% returns from the S&P, 12% returns in the stock market? It's because we can watch the market do its thing, but we're all bouncing around and dollar cost averaging in and buying too high and selling too low. The real investor won't get the kind of returns that we're all being promised by the stock market. And yet Wall Street is very good at their marketing campaigns, not to mention the government is very interested in you putting money into a tax-deferred 401k and IRA. So with all that, that's the hurricane we're shouting against, but we're trying to one little bit at a time. And now that you've heard about it, you're going to start to notice it. It's like when you buy a red car.
Yeah. And then everybody has a red car.
You got it, man. Yeah. There's over 500,000 people who have these policies that I'm familiar with, maybe more. My best research says close to 500,000 to 750,000 people have one of these policies across the country. And that's just about half as many as have Roth IRAs. It's my understanding. So it's not a big deal, but it's a big deal when you have one.
Wow. Fascinating. Okay. Very, very interesting. Well, hopefully we can shed some light and are there any like age, nothing can really hold you back here, right? In terms of like your demographic.
Oh, you bring up a great point there. Yeah. A lot of people will say, well, Mark, I'm too old for life insurance, or Mark, I had an open heart surgery, so I can't do bank on yourself. The honest answer is maybe you're right, but we'd need to sit down and talk about it. I just had a guy who had quadruple bypass surgery for, quadruple bypass. So he was uninsurable. And so he could not be the insured on the life insurance. But Jonathan, that does not cut him out from being the owner of policies. So what did he do? He was in love with the concept. He was a real estate investor. He opened a policy on his wife. He had several adult children. He had several grandchildren. He's the owner of 12 policies. He's probably 68, 70, 72 years old, somewhere in there. Couldn't get life insurance on himself, but yet he owns 12 policies. He owns all the cash in those, uses those to rehab his projects. And every year at Thanksgiving, he passes out his dividend statements to all of his family members. He's kind of an interesting dude, right? And he also asks the family to bank on him. So, right, so they come to him when they need a car loan. They come to him when they're going to send their kid to college someday. He's created the Rockefeller family office, and he's just a normal guy, and he couldn't even get life insurance. So anyway, This is something that can be done at the you and me level. We can secede from the banking industry and become our own banker.
But if you are a healthy individual, then does it give you any advantage aside from being able to be the insured?
Yeah, us youngins, as long as you've got the health, insure yourself where you can, if possible. That's generally the way we like to do it, if possible, for sure. And it gives you, a faster accumulation of cash, death benefit, all other things equal.
Fascinating. Wow. Okay. Well, this has been very, very insightful. I've had some infinite banking guests on, and I feel like every time I leave more confused. And so I finally have an actual understanding of what's going on. Because for so long, people talked about it and I was like, yeah, I want to get into this, but I actually don't really even understand what's happening. Now I feel like I could actually take a step forward and feel comfortable with knowing what's going on. And I'm sure the listeners do as well. So this has been great. We've covered obviously the bank on yourself. That's your number one strategy if it can be applied. We've covered who it may not work for. Any other insights? Obviously, there's other strategies and different things like that. I don't want to take away from those. So kind of touch on those real quick and the advantages there.
Yeah, we'll just broad brush strokes. We do a comprehensive review of your situation, and we help folks maximize their retirement income when that time comes. We do an analysis of their real estate portfolio. We'll crunch the numbers on when it's time to start taking Social Security and how exactly to help pay for your kids' college. Right down to your estate plan, and not just preparing a bunch of money for the kids, but preparing your kids for the money. It's going to be important someday because we're all going to exit all things, whether it's your business or your life or whatever. So might as well get a good exit strategy figured out.
You're going to die one day.
Yeah, that's the most positive way I could spin that, right? Yeah, the exit ramp, right? We're going to move to the other side of the grass. We're going to graduate. So whatever our approach is we first start with the person, not the product or the strategy or the solution. It starts with you. And my experience has been when you get to the end of the consultations and strategies, the feeling of control and peace of mind to know that you've got a financial plan that even on the worst case scenario where the markets are on fire, you are growing your wealth every single year. And your net worth is higher this year than it was last year. That helps a lot of people feel like they're actually moving in the right direction instead of just spinning in circles.
I love that so much. That's amazing. Well, again, thank you so much for all this insight. This has been amazing. We'll jump to the final 5 here, which you are familiar with. You did your research. First question, best advice you've gotten from a mentor?
Well, you're already in the banking business already. There's a great book. I'll save it for later, but there's a great book on this topic. And yeah, you're already in the banking business. Even if you pay cash for things, my mentor told me once, Mark, paying cash is not the answer, because when I pay cash, I'm actually financing it for my future self. Think about that for a minute. If you buy a $40,000 car, the car sticker price said $40,000, but the true price of the car was whatever $40,000 would have earned if you'd not bought the car and just left the money invested instead. Mm-hmm. So every car you buy, 30 grand, 40 grand car you buy is going to be a 6-figure price that you'll pay in the future. I'm not willing to make that transaction. So that's why I know I'm in the banking business. I might as well sit in the banker's desk and bank on myself.
Absolutely. I love that. Incredible. What is about your career that makes you feel like you're fulfilling your why?
Well, I know that money is in many ways the root of most people's stress. Journal of American Medical Association says that when the markets dip just 10%, they see a 4-fold increase in the number of heart attacks relative to the median. So I know that we're helping save lives in terms of health and marriages, families, and that gets me bounding out of bed every day to do something more. What if we had even just 10% of America doing Bank on Yourself or something like Bank on Yourself that gave them sound money solutions? What would happen to the divorce rate? What would happen to the college debt situation that we all carry, the credit card situation that we have in this country? Just 10% of us, right? What would happen? I think that just gives me goosebumps thinking about that.
That would be incredible. Absolutely. All right, time for the book. Favorite non-real estate or investment related book?
Well, there's the Bank on Yourself Revolution, which is related to the topic we've been discussing. And I recommend that one. I'll mention an extra one here quickly. David Graeber has a book called Debt, the First 5,000 Years. Debt, the First 5,000 Years. So the Bank on Yourself Revolution by Pamela Yellen, she coined the phrase, and then Debt, the First 5,000 Years.
Awesome. Love it. Adding them to the list. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Well, I've always loved the flying squirrel. Not that that's a superhero, but I just think it's super cool how a squirrel is not supposed to fly, and yet it kind of can if you give it enough wingspan or whatever. Just doing things outside the ordinary gets me pumped about what can be possible.
I love that so much.
So gliding is my superpower, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Mine flying. You got to, right? So I think humans have just been enamored with flight for our entire existence.
You got it.
Awesome. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you and learn more?
Well, if you're sick and tired of the markets beating you up and you coming to crawl back to them because they say it always comes back, and you want to build real wealth without a bunch of unnecessary risk, go to kickstartwithmark.com, kickstartwithmark.com. And happy to have a 15-minute quick chat with you to understand your situation. I think I can help, whether it's this Bank on Yourself idea or something else, kickstartwithmark.com.
Awesome. We'll link that in the show notes. Mark, thank you. Absolutely so grateful for your time and all your insight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. Listen, I know it's cliche and you hear it all the time, but please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you know when the next video is coming out. Even though this is technically a daily podcast, you know it's coming out the next day. We have a ton of content coming your way. So please like and subscribe. It helps a ton. Leave comments. Would love to know what you guys think. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much.